it's a long shot and the margins are slim, but if we stand aside, we'll lose anyway. So I'll go down swinging and be able to say that there may be hope, maybe even for us. We need a lot more people raising a ruckus, start making a fuss, start giving up, and get out into the streets, and there may be hope.
Welcome. My name is Lori Littman, and I'm the co-founder and president of 350 Sacramento. We're so excited to have you here. 350 Sacramento started small, but we've had a big impact that's constantly growing. There are so many accomplishments to choose from, but let me share a few of our accomplishments. In 2012, we partnered with the city of Sacramento on the Cool California Challenge. We encouraged people to cut their cubes and even erected a structure showing the volume of 1 metric ton of CO2. The average person in the US emits 10 of these cubes. Moy, do we have a picture? Yeah, look at how big that is, 30 by 30 by 30. That's 1 metric ton of CO2. Then around 2014, we learned that 2 oil facilities in the Bay Area were planning to expand to take explosive Bakken crude oil and toxic tar sands oil, which would result in about 700 car trains of very scary stuff coming through Sacramento each day. We joined together with people from Davis and the Bay Area, and we went to hearings, we held demonstrations, we did all kinds of actions, and we won. After 2 years, the cities that were giving the permits said no, they denied the permits. In 2017, Mayor Steinberg opened 350 Sacramento's 3rd community forum called Leading the Way to Carbon Zero. And a year later, he created the Mayor's Commission on Climate Change, which was charged with getting to carbon zero by 2045. Oh, wrong picture. Sorry. We have too many pictures of all of our activities. So anyway, 350 Sacramento was the sole environmental representative on the Mayor's Commission on Climate Change, which was charged with getting to carbon zero by 2045. And now we have a team that's working to ensure that the commission recommendations are implemented and speed it up, because we know we can't wait until 2045. And finally, very importantly, in 2019, we held a 3-weekend overnight youth camp for climate action with about 30 students or 30 young people who participated. We had peer teachers. This is Michaela, who's one of the peer teachers. And these students are now some of the leaders of the climate movement in our area. They've become great activists. And I'm losing my information, I'm sorry. So now we're designing a youth climate curriculum for next year that will connect and empower students to get involved in climate action, start environmental clubs in their schools, and choose action over despair. Right now, it's really important for us to empower the young people because they are the leaders of the climate movement. And all of this was accomplished by volunteers. For over 9.5 years, we were an all-volunteer organization. Everything we did was thanks to the extraordinary commitment and talent of our members. And about 4 months ago, we hired our first staff person, Moise Mir, who is amazing. And I'm hoping that he will show himself right now. Moise is working the back end of our event. Hi, Moise.
Hi, everyone.
So today is the kickoff of our anniversary celebration, which goes to the end of the month. And we organized an ambitious, some people would call it overwhelming, some people would call it insane, set of events that represent a few of the issues that we work on. 350 Sacramento follows an all of the above approach to climate change and climate justice. And so we work on a lot of different things. So next Wednesday, you can meet Paul Lau, who's the CEO and general manager of SMUD. He just came on, I think, last week. And since SMUD is such an important part of carbon emissions in our area, this will be an opportunity to ask Paul questions and find out what his approach is going to be to get to carbon zero or carbon neutral. We're very excited that the SMUD board recently passed a climate emergency declaration, and they are committed to becoming carbon neutral by 2030. And then next Saturday, we're having Ode to Earth, which is our signature visual and performing arts event. And this year it will be virtual. The Ode to Earth is also going to have an auction this time, and you can look that up and see what's being auctioned right now. Then we're going to focus on active transportation, and another really big part of cutting carbon emissions. And you can get out of your cars with a walk and roll-a-thon that will go for a week with a different theme each day, including a mural tour. And you just sign up. You can pledge if you want to. This is a fundraiser if you want to help with that, or you can just sign up and walk and roll that week, and can do it as a team or individually. And within that week, we're going to have the Slow Streets Action Panel. We're trying to get some slow streets in Sacramento, again, to help people get out of their cars. And Mary DeMacher will then come and speak. She wrote the book Parents' Guide to Climate Revolution. But it's not just for parents. It's very upbeat and hopeful and gives you some ideas for climate action. And then we'll have the Future of Food panel, which is an amazing panel, very ambitious. The Future of Food will cover everything from soil to packaging. And you look at those panelists and you won't want to miss it. And then our final event is the Green the Ween contest, which will encourage a sustainable Halloween, and you can post photos throughout the month. And then on the 31st, the judges, which include the mayor actually, and other luminaries from our area, they will pick some winners. So I hope that there's something here that you're interested in. It should be very interesting and fun and educational. You can go to our website at 350sacramento.org and sign up. And now I have, oh, yes, thank you. The technology is causing me problems. Okay. Anyway, I love 350 Sacramento. We have amazing, extraordinary volunteers, people who really care about one another, who have a wide range of talents and interests. And it's a wonderful group with a wonderful culture. We try and keep our activities fun, because climate change is so dire that we need to maintain, and we need to, we're in this for the long term. We need to laugh and dance, keep our spirits up, and continue to fight for a safe climate. We know this is bigger than just solving the climate crisis, so we work on many levels to create a better community, nation, and world. And we think globally, but focus locally where we can be most effective. So that's a little bit about 350 Sacramento, a little bit about us. And now I'd like to introduce Angela Vincent, who's also known as Queen Green. Angela is an author, singer, and songwriter, and a 350 Sacramento volunteer. We have the best volunteers. Take it away, Angela.
Thank you so much, Lori. I'm really honored to be here and to be a part of this historic event. As we kick off this celebration of 10 years of climate action, we'd like to take a moment to honor and express gratitude for this land and the Indigenous people who continue to be stewards of it. We are so grateful to have a local tribal member and spiritual leader with us today, Albert Tittman, to offer a land acknowledgement. Albert.
Majuksasa, Kochi, Kaniasis, Albert Tittman, Dumale, Nisanan, Miwak, Maidu, and Pit River Descent. I offer gratitude again to 360 Sacramento for asking me and then really acknowledging the first people of the lands here in this region. Again, my name is Albert Tittman. My tribal heritage is Nisanan, Miwak, Maidu, and Pit River Nation. My ancestors existed right here where the rivers flow and surround us here in Sacramento. The Sacramento River, the Cosumne River, the McClumney River, and the American River. Our people existed here since the beginning of time, and we believe along the corridors, our creation began here. And so the Miwak, the Maidu, the Nisanan, and on the other side of the river, the Putwin, the Wintu, we offer gratitude for the land acknowledgement as we have survived and thrived here since the beginning of time. We've survived many, many atrocities that almost wiped out the indigenous people of the land. But here we are, resilient as we are, maintaining our life and thriving in society here today. So we have right here the Wilton Rancheria of Miwok Indians, right here, the only federally recognized tribe in Sacramento, but surrounding are 13 other Miwok and Maidu tribes, and Putwin on the other side of the river, and the Wintu people on the other side of the rivers as well. And so it's with great honor and respect, gratitude that that we say thank you to 360 Sacramento for acknowledging, recognizing our existence, and say thank you. I'm going to offer a song, and this song connects us to the earth, connects us to the riparian forest, to the lakes, to the rivers, to the stream, to the sky. We say Creator or Joseletle, and calls in the spirit of our ancestors, and our ancestors are smiling right now as we are in this great time of healing as human beings, coming together, sharing our gifts, acknowledging one another, and taking care of Mother Earth, Father Sky, the air, the water, the plants, the animals. It's our responsibility. So I'm going to offer this song with gratitude. Joseletle, Honorska, Wale, Enke Kamo, Uke, Kekun, Susupu, Jijima, Aleta, Sawana, Wonga, Yixika. Aho, again, thank you very much. Blessings to everyone. Aho.
Thank you so much, Albert. Thank you for your presence here today and for helping ground us. And may we learn from our troubled history as a nation and move forward with peace and compassion for one another and for our common home. Before we transition to our featured guest, Mr. Bill McKibben himself, we'd like to thank our generous sponsors. We are very grateful to these agencies, organizations, businesses, and individuals for their support and the work that they do to create a sustainable future. First off, we have our climate rock stars, SMUD, which is a major donor and our very own public utility here in Sacramento. Our climate heroes, we'd like to acknowledge Chrysalis Cosmetics and the Sacramento Metropolitan Air Quality Management District. Moving on to our climate champions, we have an anonymous donor, as well as the Environmental Council of Sacramento, or ECOS, Council Member Steve Hansen, District 4, Rosanna Herber, SMUD Director, Ward 4, Dave Tamayo, SMUD Director, Ward 6, and Save the American River Association. Then we have our climate guardians, Borderlands Bakery, California Solar and Storage Association, Environmental Student Organization at Sac State, Green Restaurants Alliance, Sacramento, Resoil, Mogavero Architects, Physicians for Social Responsibility, Brandon Rose, SMUD Director, Ward 1, Sacramento Dharma Center Climate Sangha, Sacramento Native American Health Center, Solar Rights Alliance, Heidi Sanborn, SMUD Director, Ward 7, Sunrise Movement, Sacramento, Therapists for Social Responsibility, United Nations Association of the USA, Sacramento Chapter, Women's International League for Peace and Freedom. And last, our in-kind donations, we'd like to thank Bronca, Refill Madness, and Tessa Richardson Photography. Thank you again to all of our sponsors to help propel our work. Now, to give you a little taste of what 350 Sacramento is all about, Kent Lachin, a very talented 350 Sacramento volunteer, created an amazing video for us. Moise, roll the video, please.
Some people that think we are troublemakers. I think there are some people that think we are troublemakers because we do show up. I think a lot of people are just happy we're there. We've been shown a lot of respect from decision makers, but it's hard to know what they want to say about us behind the scenes. 350 started in 2010 when 350.org, an international organization, called for a global work party. And they just said, do something for the climate. So Martha Turner and I started calling all kinds of organizations, and we eventually had 12 activities on 10-10-10, the Global Work Party Day, and 350 Sacramento came out of that.
This grew out of two people getting together for a cup of coffee in January of 2010. And we discussed how could we do something that was tangible that might help.
When we first started, we weren't feeling the urgency. We thought we had 40 years before the things that are happening now were going to happen. And all we needed to do was educate people about this crisis and everything would be taken care of. And now 10 years later, we're out of time. These wildfires have certainly awakened people. And I just hope that we can do it in time. We demonstrate, we're out in the streets sometimes, and other times we were a member of the Climate Commission, the Mayor's Climate Commission.
Health effects of wildfire.
We show up at hearings, we show up at SMUD, we give talks, we work with young people, we teach young people to be activists, we meet with people who are decision makers.
These days we put on lots of Zoom presentations, we bring in speakers, we have movies, we have coffee. We try and raise awareness of the climate crisis and its solutions every chance we get. 350 Sacramento makes me able to look at my grandchildren and feel that I did my best for them, no matter what the future brings. And it's given me a community of people who are the most caring, most passionate, smartest, most delightful people to hang out with. You can look at it as the best of times and the worst of times. This is the time for the human race to get together and solve some problems and that we're seeing right now in the COVID crisis. We're seeing the inequalities, we're seeing people losing everything, and the problems are there. Climate change is exposing them, COVID is exposing them, but the problems have been there for a long time. This is our opportunity to solve them, to develop jobs that solve this problem. There's so much possibility for things to change right now.
Love it so much. So this is where I ask you all to support this amazing work. 350 Sacramento relies on donations from everyday folks who believe in the critical work that we do and who can support it financially. Become a sustaining member to help catapult 350 Sacramento into the next 10 years of climate action, which really will be the most critical decade of our lifetimes. Go to 350sacramento.org to make your donation. Now, it is my great honor to introduce Mr. Bill McKibben, co-founder of 350.org, the international organization that inspired 350 Sacramento. He is the Schumann Distinguished Professor in Residence at Middlebury College in Vermont, and he was a 2014 recipient of the Right Livelihood Prize, sometimes called the Alternative Nobel, and the Gandhi Peace Award. He has written over a dozen books about the environment, including his first, The End of Nature, published 30 years ago, and his most recent, Falter, Has the Human Game Begun to Play Itself Out? Without further ado, please join me in a warm virtual welcome for a man who has inspired so many across this planet, including myself, Mr. Bill McKibben.
Well, thank you so much for that kind introduction. What a pleasure to get to join you all. Greetings from Vermont, from Abenaki territory. I was very grateful to hear the land acknowledgement there from Sacramento, and very, very grateful to get to join you all tonight. You can tell I'm a little under the weather. Had big surgery on my shoulder a few days ago. And so if I say anything strange, it's blame the meds, but I think I'm okay. And I'm so, so happy to be with you all. This is a really signal occasion, a 10th birthday that really matters. And I want to say enormous thanks. And then I thought maybe as my birthday present, I would just give you a little sense of how I see where we stand at the moment in this fight around the country and around the world, and where we might be going. And then maybe we'll have a few questions or something. But, you know, you don't need me to tell you the trouble that we're in. California has seen as clearly as any place on planet Earth precisely what it looks like to be in the early stages of global warming. Earlier this summer, California set the world record for the highest reliably recorded temperature, 130 degrees Fahrenheit at Death Valley. That shocked me some because it's a high number. I got to say it shocked me more to read a week or two later that San Luis Obispo, 5 miles from the Pacific, had reached 120 degrees Fahrenheit. But those kind of numbers are becoming altogether too normal. And with them, of course, we all know what happens. When it gets that hot and that dry, then fire follows just as a matter of course. And this has been a year of fire. You're not alone in your travails, of course. 2020 began, though it's hard to remember since it seems like it's been going on forever, but it began in January with the epic blazes across Australia. Many millions of acres of that continent burned. We think 3 billion wild animals killed in the course of those blazes. It continued on into Siberia this summer, where we saw for the third or fourth year in a row big forest fires in places where we've never seen them before, much further north than used to burn. And this year, some of those fires were burning into the peatlands, which is very bad news because there's a lot of carbon stored in there. California's sadnesses, these great blazes still burning, and we're still in the middle of fire season, if fire season even means anything anymore in California. And while all this is happening right now, the biggest fires in the history of Bolivia and Paraguay and Argentina and down in the Pantanal of Brazil burning out of control with enormous damage. This is what happens when you warm the earth 1 degree Celsius. That's what we've done so far. But we're on a path, as you know, to warm the planet 3 degrees Celsius. And that's why what Angela and Lori and others were saying is so important. Our job, and it really is a job that's going to be played out mostly over the next decade, I think, is to try and make the fundamental changes that would be required if we were to keep that from happening, if we were to hold the temperature increases to 1.5 degrees or 2 degrees, which at this point is as much as we can hope for. It's going to be, even if we do that, difficult to cope with. But if we let it go much beyond that, then by every indication, our ability to have civilizations, anything like the ones we're used to, will be nil. Which is why the work that you're all doing is so incredibly important. Very few people get to say at any given moment, I'm doing the most important thing I could be doing on the earth right now. But you all get to say that because you are absolutely in the thick of this fight. And there are reasons to think that we may have some kind of chance, not to stop global warming, too late for that, but to keep it from getting utterly and entirely out of control. There are 2 things that have happened over the last decade that really matter. The first is the rapid decline in the cost of renewable energy and now of batteries. And much of that work's been done in California, but just to watch the plummeting cost of solar and wind power down by 90% to the place where this is now the cheapest way to generate power on this planet. It's kind of a miracle. I mean, if you think about it, the fact that you can point a sheet of glass at the sun and out the back comes light and coolness and information and modernity. That's, that's magic on a kind of Hogwarts scale. And we should celebrate it and we should take full advantage of it. Our job should be to push as rapidly as possible for change. And that push is starting to happen. In places like California, we're starting to hear dates that really matter. 2030, 2035, not 2050, not 2060. And I know that that's because of your work. The other thing that's happened over the last 10 years that gives us hope is precisely the reason we're here today. And that's that a movement has arisen. There was not a movement 10 years ago. 350.org was the kind of first attempt at a kind of early iteration of what a global movement would look like. Our first global day of action in 2009, we had 5,200 demonstrations in 181 countries. And then the next year, that Global Work Party brought in many, many more from all over the world. But most of those, of course, were small, because that's what beginnings are like. Beginnings are small. And now, thank heaven, people have rushed in from every direction. And so we have Extinction Rebellion, and we have the Sunrise Movement with their fight for the Green New Deal, and we have the remarkable demonstration of young people. You know about Greta Thunberg, but there are 10,000 Gretas scattered across the planet. And you know about and you've begun to see the incredible leadership work being done, not just on this continent, but all over the world by indigenous people who are really at the forefront of this fight, and by communities demanding environmental justice. This fight is as diverse as this world is, and leadership's coming from every direction, and it's beautiful to watch. And for me, the most beautiful part is watching the remarkable rise of volunteers everywhere, just taking matters into their own hands. I'm a volunteer too. I've always, that's all I've ever been at 350. And I think it's why I have such a deep appreciation of the work that everybody's done across the country. When we started 350, we had no idea that there were people who were going to decide to form chapters and start doing work in their local community. We didn't really have any idea what we were doing. It was me and 7 college kids in Vermont who started 350. But the fact that all over the country and all over the world, people have come up, have formed chapters and gotten to work on the crucial local parts of this fight has been one of the most beautiful parts of it all for me. And what's best about this structure that's sprung up kind of on its own is that it allows people simultaneously to be working hard in their local areas, because that's where an awful lot of the work gets done. And then the couple of times a year when we need everybody on the same page working for some national or global thing to join in there too. That we have a mechanism for kind of connecting people up and down, and it is beautiful to watch. And of course, you guys have taken full advantage of helping with those connections when we've had things that we needed on a national and a global basis. The fights over fossil fuel pipelines, the fights over fossil fuel divestment. We're now at $15 trillion in endowments and portfolios. And no small part of that came out of California, especially the decision of the UC system, which could not have happened without the continuing advocacy from people like y'all. So I think it's extraordinarily powerful, beautiful to watch what's happened and to see that it continues strong. I'm so grateful that people are raising money for the next chapters of this, for the next parts of this story. Because we don't know what the outcome is going to be here. I wish I could tell you that if we did everything right, we would win this fight. We don't really know that. In fact, we know we're not going to win because there's already so much damage that's been done and more to come. We don't even completely know that we can arrest the runaway momentum of climate change, although the best science indicates that we have a window, albeit a narrow one that's closing, to take action that will dramatically limit the degree to which the temperature rises. The Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change in 2018 really gave us the hardest, firmest deadline that we've gotten in this whole process, when they said that unless by 2030 we had dramatically transformed our energy system, which they said would involve cutting emissions in half, unless we'd done that by 2030, then the chances of meeting the targets we bravely set in Paris in 2015 were nil. So that's our marching orders. We've got a decade left when we have leverage here. And it's going to take everybody to put that leverage to work. You know, we've come through this, or we're coming through this strange year of pandemic. And I think that it's probably taught us a few things that are worth bearing in mind. One of the things that it taught us was that though individual changes are very important, they're not how we're in the end going to mostly solve this problem. Everybody's life turned upside down. People stopped commuting. I don't know anybody who'd gotten on an airplane for months. And emissions fell, but not by that much, 8 or 9%, which is a reminder that most of the damage is hardwired into our systems, and we have to reach into those systems, pull out the coal and gas and oil, and stuff in the conservation and the efficiency and the sun and the wind. And that's why everybody has to do all that work at all the SMUD hearings and legislative meetings and on and on and on. Second thing we learned from the pandemic is just the reminder that physical reality is actually real. You know, I've spent the last 30 years trying to convince people that physics and chemistry don't compromise or negotiate. And the microbe proved the same thing about biology. I mean, our president can insist that it's all a hoax or it was going to go away by Easter or the numbers were going to drop to zero, but he couldn't even keep himself from catching this thing, because he's not in charge. Biology is. And if biology says stand 6 feet apart and wear a mask, then do it. In just the same way that the carbon dioxide molecule is reminding us precisely what we have to do. Third thing, sometimes speed really matters. The countries that got right to work flattening their corona curve are a lot better off than those like us who dawdled and let that curve mount so steeply. March in coronavirus time is the last 30 years in climate time. When we ignored scientific warnings and let things get out of control, what that means is we have to move with great speed now. No more wasted effort, no more wasted time. Among other things, that's why the November 3rd election is so important. We've run out of presidential terms to waste. This is very much, as Greta was saying in her tweet that she sent around today, a last chance operation. Fourth and most important thing I think we've learned is that social solidarity really, really matters, okay? A lot of us grew up in the political shadow of Ronald Reagan, former denizen of Sacramento, who believed that government was the problem, not the solution, that markets solved all problems. His most famous laugh line at all his speeches was, the 9 scariest words in the English language are, I'm from the government and I'm here to help. Ha ha ha. It turns out that the scariest sentences in the English language are things like, we've run out of ventilators, or the hillside behind your house just caught on fire. And those you can't solve by appealing to market forces. Those you solve or not by your ability to bring together people to do work, to build the kind of solid governments, the kind of community efforts that make a huge difference. That solidarity we have a stronger sense of after this tough year. The most important quote of 2020, I think, came from George Floyd as he was being murdered, when he said, I can't breathe. And people can't breathe for lots of reasons. There's a cop kneeling on their neck. Their community is stifled by police brutality. They've got COVID filling up their lungs. And we know by now that coronavirus, like everything else, follows the same time-worn paths of race and class in choosing who it afflicts. People can't breathe because there's a coal-fired power plant or a natural gas compressor station down the street, and we know whose streets those are likely to be. People can't breathe because Well, because the wildfire smoke's gotten so bad that the authorities are telling them to stay inside and tape their windows shut to keep the particulates out. People can't breathe because it's too damn hot. We're flirting with the edges of what humans can endure when we have heat waves like the ones we're now starting to experience. So I can't breathe is the watchword, and the solution is to turn that I into a we, and to make sure that all together we build the kind of country and the kind of world where people can breathe. Because there's, in the end, nothing more human than that. And I just cannot salute you all enough for the work that you've done so far. It's been of extraordinary value. And thank you so much for it. And I can't even begin to imagine how much good work you're going to do in the next decade going forward. I wish I could tell you that your work was done and that we had this all under control and you could go home. But in fact, the next 10 years are going to tell the story. So when we get together to celebrate the 20th anniversary of 350 Sacramento, I think we'll have a pretty good idea how this story is going to come out. And then we'll be able to, well, to congratulate each other or console each other, or probably a little bit of both. And at any rate, our chances depend entirely on what it is that we manage to do, each of us together, to make change happen. And nobody's doing it more forthrightly and powerfully than y'all. So thank you so much, and happy birthday.
Thank you so much. Round of applause, virtual round of applause. Like to encourage folks tuning in to please post your questions in the chat, and we will be monitoring those and bringing those in. I'll kick us off with our first question. Can you speak a little bit about hope? With so much going on in our country, COVID, white supremacy, police brutality, the election, and of course, climate change, it can be so easy to fall into that despair, as you mentioned. So can you share, how do you keep going? What keeps you energized, and what gives you hope that we are going to rise to this moment as a society and do what needs to be done to solve all of these interrelated crises?
Well, Angela, that's a good question, and I don't always rise to the occasion myself. I sometimes get depressed and sad. I'm lucky because I live out in the woods, so I can generally cheer myself up with a wander through the forest for a little while, especially this week because Vermont is at its most colorful and beautiful. But for me, it's this rise of movements that's really most cheering and empowering. You know, I think that there were two great inventions of the 20th century. One was the solar panel, which in the 21st may be our salvation. And the second was the invention of the nonviolent social movement. The suffragists, Gandhi, Dr. King, others, figuring out this new technology of a movement building that allows the small and the many to stand up to the mighty and the few. And that's what you all are such a part of. And you have so many brothers and sisters around the world engaged in the same work. And one thing to bear in mind is that many of our fellows in this fight come from places that contributed hardly anything to the problem that we now face. And yet they're willing to join in and work hard and with love, not anger and rancor. And so whenever I get the privilege of getting to spend a lot of time on the phone with the Zoom with people in Bangladesh or people in the Pacific Islands or people in South America or wherever it is. And each time I come away reminding myself, if they can do it, certainly I can play my part here too. And I will say, I mean, I'm no Pollyanna. I mean, the title of that original first book on climate change was the cheerful phrase, the end of nature, So I'm not convinced everything's going to work out all right, but I am convinced of something that I wasn't convinced of 10 years ago, which is that we're together going to make a hell of a fight of it. And that wasn't clear a decade ago. And now it is. And in that fight, one sees signs of change, Among Democratic voters at the moment, climate change is the #1 issue that people are voting on as they head to this election. And it's beginning to feel to me like this election may actually be a comeuppance for the powerful forces that have so dominated and degraded our democracy. Everybody's got to keep working full out through November 3rd to make sure of that. And it's not like November 3rd is, the end. It's really the beginning of the, work that needs to be done. And it's also not like Washington is the only place we're doing this fighting. Wall Street is at least as important, because the great banks and asset managers and so on have at least as much power in this world and actually can move considerably more quickly. I began the year by getting arrested at the Chase Bank branch nearest the nation's capital in Washington, with Jane Fonda cheering us on from the other side of the glass. And I was really pleased to see yesterday that Chase has now announced that they're going to align the actions of their bank with the Paris Accords. Now, does that mean a whole hell of a lot? We don't know yet. And people are going to have to work super hard to make sure that it actually does translate. But let me tell you, if it had not been for people like you pushing for the last year, they would not have felt the slightest need to say anything like that. So on we go, fighting as hard as we can. And in that, I think, taking some hope. Because, for a bunch of people who are just kind of making it up as we go along, we're doing okay.
Thank you for your candid answer. And you mentioned the election, so I'll segue into another question we received from Robin. What should we be doing to organize as soon as there is a new administration, potentially in Washington, D.C.?
So I think that, look, as I said, November 3rd's beginning, if it goes well, not the end. And there's going to be a lot of work to push to make sure that that the Biden administration and that the Democrats in Congress actually do things on the scale we need them to do it. And they may not. The bargaining and the fighting will be hard because the oil industry's never had to play a card here. There's never been a real effort, we've never come close to getting federal legislation around climate change. So, they're in the position to play their first card, and their first card will be something like, we'll take a $40 a ton carbon tax. And that will, there'll be a lot of people, including some Democrats, who'll be like, okay, that's pretty, that's something. Let's do that, and it's easier to do than the Green New Deal or whatever. There's no strong intellectual argument against a carbon tax. The problem will be if they demand too much in return. We can't say, for instance, that there never be litigation against the oil companies for their role in climate denial, because it was that kind of litigation that was the ultimate hammer that brought, say, the tobacco industry to its knees eventually. We can't say that we're going to stop regulating, otherwise we need far more regulation, not less, of the oil industry. So the organizing is going to be hard. You guys know how hard it is. Look how hard everybody has fought in California to try and get Governor Brown and then Governor Newsom to stop approving new oil wells. That should be pretty much a gimme. The oil industry is a tiny part of California's economy at this point, but still, it's incredibly hard because these guys are powerful. So no one should think for a minute that it's all going to be easy, and it's going to take a lot of work. But I will tell you that there's some good signs. I'll tell you one of my favorite from the East Coast. came earlier this summer. There was a big Senate primary in the state of Massachusetts, and the young heir to the Kennedy name, Joe Kennedy, looked just like Kennedy, all that. He decided he was going to challenge Ed Markey, and when he did, the polls immediately had him 17 points up, which is a lot. But Ed Markey, the incumbent, found himself embraced by the climate movement, especially by the young people, the Sunrise Movement and else. And they put on one hell of a campaign, and before it was over, he'd won that election by 10 points, strictly on the back of his support for climate action. So to me, those kind of straws in the wind indicate that we have a fighting chance to get something dramatic done over the next couple of years.
Thank you. Can you talk a little bit about your thoughts on capitalism and the argument that we need to do away with it to curb climate change?
Well, I don't know how to do away with it, you know. I mean, I'm a reasonably good organizer, but I don't quite know even quite what that means or how one would organize exactly to do it. But I think it's completely clear, as my dear friend and longtime 350 board member colleague Naomi Klein has said over and over again, that capitalism is going to have to change dramatically to deal with what we have, the situation we're in, because clearly Ronald Reagan was wrong. Markets don't solve all problems. Markets cause problems too. You know, the temperature of the planet has gone up a degree. We've lost half the sea ice in the summer Arctic. For me, the really interesting part of this challenge is figuring out how you use this crisis that we're in to move towards changing some of the features of our economic systems and our power systems. I think a key first step, and one very good reason beyond its effect on the environment to back the rapid transition to renewable energy, is that they're somewhat less dominated by a few small pockets of great wealth. You know, coal and gas and oil only exist in a few places on the planet, and whoever happens to control those places ends up with way too much power. The great example would be the Koch brothers, our biggest oil and gas barons, who have, you know, leveraged that power to buy themselves a political party. People will make lots of money off sun and wind, you know, but not Koch brothers kind of money, for the simple reason that you can find the sun and the wind everywhere, and it's delivered for free, you know. And so as we make that transition, we begin, I think, to erode away one of the biggest sources of unfair influence, economic wealth, and power in our society. Beyond that, I think that we've got to move quickly in the direction of a society that works for lots more people than the one we have at the moment. If this year hasn't taught us that, it sure should. There's just been too much pain and too much trauma. I don't know, and I'm not sure anyone knows exactly what it would mean to end capitalism, but I do think it's pretty clear that we have to end the kind of concentrations of wealth and power that we have now, because they're dragging us over a cliff.
Thank you. Lost connection there for a minute. That question was from Anna. So as we get close to the end of the hour, I'd like to give you a chance to give some closing remarks if you'd like, and maybe offer a piece of advice, especially to the young climate activists that are out there just getting into this movement. You have one piece of advice maybe that you could leave us that you wish you had known when you started out, or something to leave us with to go forward. That would
Well, young climate activists are doing us all correct. They've got it just right, and they're demonstrating just how to do this and what fun that is to see. And you know, the job of the rest of us is to expose more old people to all of this and help them, you know, help get them engaged in this fight too. And I think that's I mean, that's actually the organizing I'm trying to do the most of now. I think. I wish I'd understood 30 years ago when I wrote The End of Nature that we weren't really engaged in an argument. We were mostly engaged in a fight. You know, I spent too long thinking that it was all just about books and data and analysis. And I've come to understand that it's an awful lot about power and money. And I don't say that to be cynical. That's just reality, in the same way that carbon dioxide is reality, you know? It's just how the world that we live in works. So knowing that frees one up to go build power oneself. We're not going to do it by raising, you know, you guys, we got to raise enough money to keep, you know, 350 Sacramento going and Moy's in business and, you know, so on and so forth. But we know we're not going to match Exxon with cash. We're going to match them with creativity, with passion, with spirit, with the occasional willingness perhaps to spend one's body and go to jail, you know. And that's what movements look like. And movements turn out to be beautiful things. And I am just could not be more moved to get to be a part of this celebration and to get to say very, very personal and deep and warm thanks for the way that y'all have taken up this mantle and done this job. I wish we didn't have this pandemic so that I could be there to say those things in person to y'all. And I will look forward in the not too distant future to getting to join you there. So I can say thanks in person. You're a big part of a big, big fight. I hope you can feel the support from people in every corner of the planet who are engaged in this same work, because they can definitely feel what y'all are doing and understand that we're in this together in just the deepest and most beautiful ways. So many, many thanks, many, many thanks. And we'll see you before long.
Mr. Bill McKibben, everybody. Thank you. Lori, take us out.
Thank you, Bill, for honoring us with your presence and for your wisdom. And many thanks to all of you who participated and do so much for the climate. We also want to give a call out to those volunteers behind the scenes who made this event happen. Moyes, Christy, Angela, Kat, Allie, Tova, Goli, Joe, and others I've probably forgotten, I'm sorry. Please don't forget to sign up for our other anniversary events. Next Wednesday, we'll meet Powell Lau, and next Saturday is Ode to Earth and the auction. And you can go to our website, 350sacramento.org, to learn more about our many activities. Sign up to be on our email list so that you receive information about what's going on in climate action, and donate if you can, and vote. We all need to vote this time. Thank you so much, and have a wonderful evening, and breathe the air. Goodbye.
Very good. I think Wise is sharing this screen.
He's muted though.
Oops, that looks good.
He's muted though.
You're not muted. Oops, that looks really good, doesn't it?